Look at this one. I think Grandma wandered into the wrong building. The words, slick with the unearned confidence of youth, cut through the low hum of the Naval Special Warfare Training Center's mess hall. The crowd of BUD/S candidates, all muscle and bravado, rippled with nervous laughter. They were sharks in a tank, and she, a woman with silver threading her dark hair, sitting alone with a book, seemed like a minnow tossed into their midst. The speaker, a recruit named Jensen with a jawline sharper than his intellect, smirked at his friends. They were a pack, 5 of them, their collective arrogance a palpable force field. But the woman, the target of their casual cruelty, did not react. She did not look up from her page. She did not flinch. Her hands, resting on the table, were still. Her posture, a study in relaxed economy, did not change. It was a silence so profound, so absolute, that it should have been a warning. In the corner of the room, Command Master Chief Wallace, a man whose face was a roadmap of forgotten conflicts, paused with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He saw the recruit's mockery, but then he saw her hands, the way her fingers rested, the calm in her shoulders. He saw a discipline that couldn't be taught, only forged. If you believe true strength needs no announcement, type respect below. The recruits continued their performance, their voices growing louder as her silence unnerved them. They were used to reactions, to fear or anger, the emotional currency they traded in. Her stillness was a void they felt compelled to fill with more noise, more insults. "Hey, you lost, ma'am?" Jensen postured, leaning over her table. "The library is across the base. This is where the real work gets done." The other candidates snickered, their chests puffed out, playing their part for the audience of their peers. The woman slowly placed a thin bookmark between the pages, closed her book with a soft sigh, and set it aside. She picked up her fork and began to eat her meal, each movement deliberate, efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion. Her focus was absolute, as if the 5 men looming over her were nothing more than a mild change in air pressure. This was the ultimate insult to their ego, not anger, not fear, but complete and total irrelevance. Her calm was a mirror reflecting their own immaturity, and they hated what they saw. They saw her as a relic, a civilian who had stumbled into a sacred space. They assumed her age meant weakness, her gender meant she was lost, her silence meant she was intimidated. Every assumption was a nail they were hammering into their own coffin of ignorance. Suddenly, a klaxon blared through the mess hall, a jarring, electronic shriek that cut through the chatter. An instructor's voice boomed over the intercom. "Drill, drill, drill. Mass casualty simulation, airway obstruction. Training station 4 now." A murmur of excitement and anxiety filled the room. This was it, a chance to prove themselves. Jensen and his crew, eager to demonstrate the superiority they felt, were the first to rush toward the designated area where a high-fidelity training dummy lay on the floor. The scenario was a classic and a brutal one, a field injury with a completely blocked airway. The recruits had 60 seconds to establish a patent airway using the equipment provided. It was a test of knowledge, speed, and grace under pressure. Jensen went first. His hands, which had seemed so steady when gesturing with arrogance, now fumbled with the cricothyrotomy kit. He misidentified the cricothyroid membrane. He hesitated. "Time," the instructor barked, shoving him aside. One by one, his friends tried, and one by one, they failed, their panic mounting as the seconds ticked away. Their loud confidence had evaporated, replaced by the sweat of incompetence. The room watched, the earlier amusement curdling into second-hand embarrassment. The woman finished the last bite of her meal. She neatly placed her fork and knife together on the plate, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and stood. Her movements were a fluid ballet of economy. She walked not to the exit, but toward the chaotic scene at Training Station 4. The instructor, a hardened SEAL himself, saw her approach and opened his mouth to dismiss her, his face a mask of annoyance at the civilian intrusion. But before he could speak, he caught the eye of Command Master Chief Wallace, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The instructor's mouth snapped shut. The woman knelt beside the dummy, her knees not even making a sound on the linoleum floor. She ignored the scattered, failed equipment. Her hands moved with a speed that was not rushed, but hyper-efficient. They were not the hands of a librarian. They were the hands of a master craftsman at her forge. In one smooth motion, she palpated the neck, her fingers finding the precise location in an instant. With her other hand, she picked up an en-bloc clip from the kit. There was a soft, precise click, a hiss of simulated air. She had performed a perfect emergency cricothyrotomy. The entire evolution, from kneeling to completion, had taken less than 7 seconds. A deafening silence fell over the mess hall. It was the sound of 100 assumptions shattering at once. Jensen could only whisper, his voice hoarse with shock, "That's not possible." Command Master Chief Wallace pushed himself off the wall and walked into the center of the silent room, his boots echoing with authority. He didn't look at a file. He didn't need a computer. He was a living library of the Navy's most guarded secrets. He stopped beside the woman, who was now quietly wiping the tool clean before placing it back in its kit. "You recruits." Wallace's voice was low, but it carried the weight of command. "You want to know what a real operator looks like?" He gestured toward the woman. "You see a grandmother. I see a ghost." The room held its breath. "You see someone who is lost. I see the person who drew the maps you're not cleared to look at." He took a step closer to Jensen, his eyes like chips of granite. "This is Senior Chief Petty Officer Anya Sharma. Retired. At least, that's what her file says." He let the words hang in the air, a pendulum of dread swinging over the recruits' heads. He then turned back to Sharma, his entire demeanor shifting. The hard-bitten Command Master Chief, a man who made captains nervous, straightened his back, brought his heels together, and rendered the sharpest, most respectful salute of his life. "Senior Chief," he said, his voice ringing with reverence. "It is an honor to have you back, ma'am." The salute hung in the air, a symbol of a hierarchy that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with respect. Sharma simply gave a small, acknowledging nod. "Master Chief," she replied, her voice calm and even, the first words she had spoken. Wallace held the salute for a moment longer before dropping it and turning back to the sea of stunned faces. "Her call sign was Banshee," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing them to lean in. "She has 3 Navy crosses, a stack of bronze stars you couldn't jump over, and more classified commendations than the rest of this base combined. That airway procedure you all just failed? She didn't just write the training protocol for it. She invented the technique on the fly, in the dark, under enemy fire, after taking a round to her left arm, saving the life of a Delta operator who is now a 3-star general at SOCOM." He paused, letting the weight of the information crush them. "You didn't mock a civilian. You mocked a living legend. You judged a book by its cover and discovered you were illiterate." Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the patience of a predator who looked at 5 yapping puppies and decided you weren't worth the energy to correct. Lesson 1 of your careers: the most dangerous person in the room is never, ever the loudest 1 inch. The story of what happened in the mess hall spread not like wildfire, but like a shockwave. It passed in hushed tones in the barracks, in awestruck messages on secure forums, and in the stern lectures from instructors to new arrivals. The legend of Banshee in the mess hall became an immediate and powerful piece of institutional folklore. Jensen and his 4 friends became a cautionary tale, the poster boys for arrogant ignorance. The next morning, they were not on the training field. They were in the mess hall, on their hands and knees, scrubbing the floors with a humility that was as profound as their earlier arrogance had been shallow. They worked in complete silence, their movements slow and deliberate, as if trying to physically erase their shame. Later that day, they found Senior Chief Sharma in a classroom, where she was now officially listed as a guest instructor for Advanced Field Medicine. They approached as a group, heads bowed. It was Jensen who spoke, his voice cracking. "Ma'am, we were wrong. There's no excuse. We apologize." Sharma looked up from the diagnostic tablet she was studying, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer forgiveness or absolution. She offered a course correction. "Apology accepted," she said, her tone professional and direct. "Now forget it. Wallowing in your mistake is as useless as the arrogance that caused it." She stood and walked them over to the same model of training dummy. "Your failure yesterday wasn't a moral one. It was technical. You let pressure override procedure. Your hands followed your panic instead of your training." She then spent the next hour with them, not punishing, but teaching. Her hands guided theirs, correcting their grip, showing them the subtle landmarks on the throat. She broke down the procedure into 100 micro-movements, each one perfected through thousands of hours of practice and real-world application. She was no longer a ghost or a legend. She was a teacher, and her competence was a language they were finally beginning to understand. She was instilling in them the most important lesson of their lives. Respect isn't about who a person is. It's about what they can do. The old training dummy from the mess hall was retired. It was mounted on the wall of the main briefing room, a permanent fixture. Beneath it, a small, polished brass plaque was installed. It read simply, "The Sharma procedure. Humility is the first step." Months later, a new class of BUD/S candidates filed into the same mess hall. They were just as young, just as strong, and just as full of nervous energy as the class before them. They saw a quiet, unassuming woman with a touch of silver in her hair, sitting alone at a table with a book. But there were no snickers. There were no smirks. There were no whispers. Instead, a quiet reverence fell over the tables nearest to her. The recruits didn't stare, but they watched. They saw the economy of her movements, the stillness of her posture, the deep, unshakable calm that radiated from her. They had all heard the story. The instructors now made it a mandatory part of their orientation. The tale of the 5 recruits was a parable about the fatal flaw of assumption. It was a lesson that true strength is quiet, that competence is silent, and that the person you should fear the most is the one who doesn't need to tell you who they are. They knew they were in the presence of a standard-bearer, a quiet professional whose legacy was not carved in stone, but lived in the skills she passed on. The culture of the training center had subtly but permanently shifted. The focus on loud, chest-thumping bravado was tempered with a new, deeper respect for quiet, demonstrated skill. The recruits learned that the trident was not a license for arrogance, but a mark of profound responsibility. Senior Chief Sharma's presence became a living reminder of that truth. She never spoke of her past, never mentioned her accolades. She simply taught, her actions a continuous lesson in precision and humility. Her legacy wasn't in the medals locked away in a box or the stories told in hushed tones. It was in the steady hands of a young medic performing a procedure under pressure. It was in the respectful silence of a new recruit observing a master at her craft. It was in the understanding that a true warrior's worth is measured not by the noise they make, but by the impact they have. True competence is a language spoken through action, a silent creed that echoes far louder than any boast. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where silent discipline defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.